Hale Milgram, for those of you that don't know. And I love this theater, and I love the film that we just were fortunate enough to see. Both my wife and I, my wife's right out there, Anne, love music, love film. And tonight, right here, we have both the producer and the director. And they have spent a good portion of their lives melding music with film and putting documentaries and concerts that we can then sit and enjoy both in the theater or in a lot of cases in our own homes. I wanted to share a few of their creative artistry that they have done over the last few years. I'll start with Stephanie. Stephanie established Delilah Films, which was her first production company after co-producing The Complete Beatles in 1984. She worked with artists such as Smokey Robinson, Toots and the Maytals, Ray Charles, Deep Purple, The Doors, Black Sabbath, troubadours of folk music, Beach Boys, the Monkees, the Beach Boys, Jeff Berry and Friends. She also worked with the Beach Boys. Oh, I said that. You're really listening. Earth, Wind, and Fire, a tribute to Graham Parsons, Chicago and Earth, Wind, and Fire, Boys to Men. Delilah Films has also produced numerous documentaries and concerts for PBS, MTV, VH1, HBO, including Tom Petty Going Home, and Black Sabbath, Volumes 1 and 2, and Foreigner. That's just a few of them, actually. Joni Mitchell, Roy Orbison and Friends, Black and White Night. By the way, that Roy Orbison we showed a few months ago here, one clip from it, and it features Bruce Springsteen, Elvis Costello, Bonnie Raitt, Jackson Browne, Katie Lang, J.D. Souther, T-Bone Burnett, and backed by James Burton and a number of Elvis Presley's band. That's just a few of the things that Stephanie has been involved in, including being an author and putting out the book that she'll be signing after this Q&A. Taylor Hackford. Taylor was born right here in Santa Barbara, went to Santa Barbara High School. I think that somebody told me the only high school in town at that time. He won the Academy Award for Best Live Action Short Film for Teenage Father and nominated many times for highly regarded feature films. And here are a few of them that I wanted to mention. Bukowski, The Idolmaker, which was one of my favorites, An Officer and a Gentleman, Against All Odds, White Nights, La Bamba, and Everybody's All-American, Blood In, Blood Out, Dolores Claiborne, When We Were Kings, The Devil's Advocate, Proof of Life, Ray, which I think most of us have seen many times, Love Ranch, Parker, The Comedian. And that's, again, just a few of the projects that Taylor's done. And tonight, I wanted to just sit with you, and I'd like to ask you to help possibly with some questions in a few minutes, but I'd like to start off by introducing Stephanie Bennett and Taylor Hackford. It is my pleasure. Here we are at the Lobero Theater. How different were your roles in the process of making this film? Who would like to?
Stephanie should start because she initiated the project. Yes, after doing the Roy Orbison show, we started thinking about who would be another great legendary figure who needed to be resuscitated. It was that series I was doing for HBO. And Chuck Berry came to mind. And initially it was going to be a TV show, but then we kind of started really researching Chuck Berry and realized of his great importance. And at the same time, Susie Peterson started a new division at Universal. And she said, if you can find a feature film director, we'll make a feature film. And Tom Edelman and I interviewed with Chuck several directors, but Taylor was brilliant because Rafe Wilson took him to the Dome, where Chuck took his McDonald's Happy Meal, or maybe it was the grandpa meal, I'm not sure. But anyway, he literally took a McDonald's into a Dome, having a meeting with Bob Rafelson. But Taylor invited him to a Chinese restaurant that he'd actually been to once with his son Rio, and he'd asked for Chuck's autograph. So he knew the kind of food that Chuck liked. So anyway, Taylor Hackford became our choice of director, and how could we have done better?
Well, for me, it was a gift because, I grew up in this town. As you know from being in Santa Barbara, it doesn't have a huge ethnic mix. It's got a lot of Latinos, a few blacks, but with Chuck Berry, it didn't matter. Chuck Berry had an ability to, as he said on film, he cut right through. If you were a teenager, he knew how to write to you. He knew how to write songs that colored your life. And I grew up, I went to Garfield Elementary, and I went to La Cumbre, and I went to Santa Barbara High. And Chuck Berry was very important to me. He was my guy. He actually expressed music. And I loved rock and roll. I loved Elvis. I loved all the beginnings of rock and roll. But Chuck Berry defined it better than anybody else. And as I progressed in my career, and I went to USC in Los Angeles, I started to take rock and roll seriously. It is the social statement of my generation. And there was nobody, as John Lennon said, is there anybody more definitive than John Lennon? And he said, Chuck Berry made my life, made my career. Keith Richards said, I heard Chuck Berry and I knew what I wanted to do. So, what could be more important than this? So what Stephanie was giving me was a gift to actually deal with someone who was truly important to me, and I believe to America and to the world. And, you have people that didn't know him. There are things that I did a 4-disc DVD, which I'm working with Universal right now. We're just about to reissue. It'll be on iTunes. It'll have hard goods. It'll be out. But there's a lot of outtakes from this. There's a fantastic moment where Clapton goes, I was playing when I was a kid. I was trying to get these chords that Chuck did, and I'm stretching. It took me months to get my fingers to hit the keys. He says, then I met Chuck, and his hands are so big. I realized he just went like this. But the point is, he had that influence, this little kid in England who was trying to play like him, and defined, remember that entire English movement. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Clapton, it's all because of Chuck Berry. So you do that, you get the opportunity, you meet him, he's a charming guy. Of course, if you know about Chuck Berry, and the other reason I wanted to do the film, there's not a darker figure. It has nothing to do with race. There's not a darker figure in rock and roll than Chuck Berry. He was in jail 3 times. The first time he was put in jail was on the Mann Act, taking a underage woman across the state lines. Chuck Berry was into sex. Never did drugs, wasn't a drinker, but he made up for it with sex. And you knew that if you're going to I knew it. If I was going to do a film with Chuck Berry, I was going to get controversy. It was going to be difficult. I had no idea how difficult. But the thing that was interesting, and I'll turn this over to Stephanie, because I was hired to make a celebration of Chuck Berry's 60th birthday. a celebration. And that's what I set out to do, and I wanted to deliver to Universal what they asked for. Little did I know it was going to be probably the biggest nightmare of my entire career. Chuck Berry was incredibly difficult, and it was like we had all come from all over the world, all this incredible talent, to celebrate a man who had had huge influence on us. And at every turn, he tried to sabotage the whole thing. And it was just amazing. And I said to Chuck at the very beginning, because I knew that I wanted to get as much from him as I possibly could. I said, Chuck, I'll never backstab you. I'll always be straight out. I want to discover you. I want to celebrate you. But I want the truth. And my job is to come, but I'm not going to sneak around and stab you in the back. And you can see various times in there where he refused. He shut the camera off. He did these things. Normally, because I'm an investigative reporter originally, I would have pushed. I would have done the Mike Wallace on him. But I said I wouldn't, and I didn't. So because of that, I truly believe we got more than anybody else could have. But he was an amazing character, and I think the reason that we're here, and I'm thrilled to see this many people, because you don't get to see the film after it's released. It's been, a long time, 30 years, and to see it with an audience and hear all the laughter, you get all the jokes, you're there, that's thrilling to me. But the reason we're here is that Stephanie's written a book. Again, I have to say that Chuck was great with me. I love him, he was terrific, and I'm a man. And as a man, he kind of had we're a fraternal number that we went on. He was diabolical and difficult, but there was this. Stephanie's a woman, and she went through things that I didn't. And she's decided to write about it, which I think is fascinating. That's why we're here in her books in the lobby.
It's actually not just my story. What happened is when Chuck died 2 years ago, almost to the day, everybody, all of us who were involved in the film originally, started calling each other and saying, do you remember, do you remember, do you remember? And I was in the process of writing a book about my whole career as a music producer. And I said, wait a minute, there's a book here. This film is an amazing film. It was almost a year and a half in the making, because even though it was only filmed for about 10 days, there was a lot of pre-production and post-production. So it just is, I don't know how many films you could write a book about, but this is really it's both funny and it's also women who read it just can't believe what I went through. But it's kind of, as Taylor would say, the show has to go on. And I know Susie Peterson from Universal, her job was in jeopardy. It was a very difficult situation because Chuck somehow had got this weird thing that if he could find an excuse to get more money, he would figure it out. I mean, he's like a genius. It would be, the contract we had wasn't worth the paper it was written on. I mean, we just could have thrown it away from day one, because he renegotiated it. Every single day before he started filming anything, going anywhere, he would want it redone. And you can imagine what that did to the production. It slowed everything down. Initially, I didn't want Taylor to know what was going on because I felt it would interfere with his view of Chuck.
But I found out very quickly. Chuck had been to 3 different prisons. He was arrested when he was 18 and served 3 years in the Missouri State Prison. And he never forgot it, and I think it had a great deal to do with his rock and roll, because he wasn't really a musician before he went in there. In prison, he learned the guitar, he sang in a gospel group, he was able to get out of a work detail to sing. And when he came out, he became who he became, which I think was really important. I wanted to go to that prison. And by the way, Chuck Berry never forgot it. He had a real feeling for those inmates. And he would go there on a regular basis, and he performed for them. He empathized with them. So I said, I want to go here. And he is before our crew arrived. I wanted to see it. When you have to go places and you're shooting, you need to scout them. So I said, Chuck, let's take a scouting trip. And we went to the prison. And he wanted Stephanie is the producer. My assistant, Jerry Lauritsen, was a woman. His daughter, Chuck's daughter was there. And then Chuck had a girlfriend that was there. And so we had four women, right? We had 4 women, myself, Tom, and that was it. And Chuck had a video camera. He had a good, Chuck always high-tech. He said, Chuck, let me take the video camera, because my crew isn't here yet, and I'll photograph it. And he said, cool, here it is. So we go, and when we pull up to a prison, I've made a film in prison. It's a heavy security. We go up, and they know him so much, it's like, hey, how are you? Hi, Chuck, how are you? He says, I'm taking him up above. I said, okay. They open the gate, and we go into this prison. It's a medium security prison. And we go up, and we go to the yard, right in the middle of the yard, where when the prisoners are let out, that's where they exercise. And we're alone there, and a female guard kind of comes out and going, well, what are you doing here? What are you doing? Nobody had told them. And Chuck said, well, I'm going to show these people, we're going to make a movie, we're going to show the people a thing. All of a sudden, you could see the look on this female guard's face, like, holy shit, what are these women doing here? And what is going on? And she gets on her microphone and she starts to call in. And at that time, you can hear these, it's like a schoolyard, ringing bells. That means that it's time for the inmates to come out in the field and exercise. So they come out, and we're standing around these 2 cars. And listen, these guys they're people that are doing life in this prison. And they look, and there's these women, and they're like, what's going on here? And then they see Chuck. Hey, Chuck, how are you? And Chuck goes, how's things at the old cell block? And they said, great, come on, let's go. And he leaves. He leaves with this group of people, and we're there. We're there with 1 female guard, and that's it. And then another bell rings, and more guys come out on the thing. And I mean, it's pretty weird. And she goes very quietly, trying to remain calm. She said, now, everybody stay together, and let's walk across the yard over there to where that administration building is. Try to be calm. Let's just walk there. And pardon me, and Stephanie gives me shit about this to this day. I got a camera. I'm shooting. I think this can be interesting. Well, as we go across, more and more guys start surrounding these women, and it's like, they're not being aggressive or being violent, but there's a chance to get a feel, and we're going across, and they are terrified. And at one point, Chuck's girlfriend, who's wearing he had advised her to wear a mini skirt. She's got these long legs and heels. She goes down, and these legs go up, and I see about 50 hands reach in. And it was pretty weird. I never felt, this is the thing I have to say in my own defense, I never felt that it wasn't ever any violent. They were never going to rape and pillage. They didn't lose themselves. They knew that if they really screwed up.
You know that.
I could just feel it. I've been in, by the way, no, I made a film in prison, all right? I made Blood In, Blood Out in San Quentin. I've been in the joint, and I know how but you didn't know it. But so we finally got across. The women were like freaked. And now everybody was out. And we were stuck inside. And Chuck comes back, and Stephanie is pissed, saying, Chuck, how could you bring us here? He goes, and he said, well, I know it's not a big deal. And of course, the warden now finds out we can't get out. So Chuck agrees to...
Actually, let's get... What he said was, you said to him, why did you do this?
He said it to me personally. I said, why would you possibly bring these women here? He said, I know what it's like to be in here without women. I know what it feels like with these guys. So, he's a strange guy, and this, but anyway, he had to play a concert to get out as he was on stage, and the inmates were playing. I was filming the whole thing. It was great. I mean, one camera, but it was still great. We all got out, and we had to go out the back door. They were there. We went out there. We got out of the place. It was a major experience. Well, two things happened. One, the head of the state prison system found out and was really pissed and called Chuck Berry and gave him shit, and Chuck doesn't take shit from anybody. And he said, well, fuck you. And so all of a sudden, my great opening to the movie is gone. The prison system would go, and I said, I wouldn't go back there anyway. And it was his camera. He said, give me the camera. And I went, Chuck, I think I need this camera for the, and he said, give me the goddamn camera, it's mine. That's footage we never saw again. It was an amazing moment to do this. And, you know, this was what happened throughout the movie.
It's in the book.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's in the book.
One of the things in the book.
Yeah. I mean, I think the other thing is these kinds of things happen throughout. You know, you're there to celebrate this man. And, of course, now you see a sequence early in the film where Bruce Springsteen, you know, Chuck is very famous that he just would go out alone to a gig, and he would do a pickup band, and you have the most famous, successful rock and roller of his generation narrating that sequence. Now let me tell you how it happened. He's already screwed me out of, I have 5 days of rehearsal and 1 day of concert. So I have 6 days to make this entire movie. We were there a little longer, but of the crew, I had 6 days to make the whole movie. And my first day, which was going to be at the prison, screwed. I'm not going to be able to do it. So I'm there working on the first day of rehearsal, and Chuck comes up to me and says, oh, Taylor, by the way, I can't shoot on Wednesday. I say, what? Chuck, I got 6 days to shoot this whole movie. What's going on? He says, I got a gig. I said, you got a gig? You knew, you're the producer of the movie. You and Stephanie are the producers. This is your film. We're all here to celebrate you. You're taking one of my days? And he says, I got a gig. I'm playing the Ohio State Fair in Columbus, Ohio, and they're paying me $25 grand. And I go, Chuck, you're getting $500,000 to do this. None of us are getting paid. You're getting $500,000. He says, hey man, if I'm making money, don't you dare tell me I can't make it. So I say, I think around and walk around and go, what the fuck am I gonna do? I got a crew here, I got a day to shoot. So I go back to Chuck and I say, Chuck, we're coming with you. If you're gonna go, I've got a crew, I'm gonna shoot it. I'll do sound, the cameraman will come, we'll get a lighting person, and we're gonna go. And he goes, fine with me, but I ain't paying. So I go, and he does, it's great. He goes out, he parks in the short-term car park at the St. Louis airport. He gets on the airplane, he flies to Columbus. He rents a car, he goes to the gig, he walks in with his briefcase. In his briefcase is a change of shirt. He puts on a tie-dye shirt, psychedelic. He goes and collects his cash, puts it in the briefcase. He goes on stage, sets the briefcase, and I think it might have been handcuffed to the microphone. The band doesn't know what they're playing. They play. He knocks him out. He gets back in, goes to the airport. We follow him home. That night he goes to the short-term car park, gets his car, and drives home. And I have this sequence. So, you know, what are we going to use it for? At least I shot it. And then we talked to John Landau, who is Springsteen's manager, and Landau says,